Okay, so today I'd like to talk about a book by John W. Gordon, South Carolina and the American Revolution. Gordon's main argument is that South Carolina played a decisive role in the winning of the American Revolution, as he says on page 1. Um, Points out how nearly 20% of all Americans who died in combat in the Revolution died in South Carolina. There were more battles fought in this state than in any other state. We also see a variety and an intensity of warfare not seen in any other state, with both guerrilla warfare and conventional styles of fighting. We also see the brutal civil war that erupts in the backcountry in this state. The South Carolina also contained both the largest gain for the British and also the largest loss for the Americans with the capture of Charleston, which was the one of only 5 cities in the U.S. that had a population over 10,000, and the only one of its kind in the South at this time. The Americans also lost a major army at Charleston, which was equivalent to the British defeat at Saratoga, but somehow the Americans are able to bounce back from this, and the battle subsequent to Charleston in South Carolina actually lead to Cornwallis's withdrawal toward Yorktown eventually and his defeat. Uh, Gordon also argues that the war in South Carolina brought to ruin Britain's hopes for winning back America. He says that the British's three main means for accomplishing their overall war goals was to conquer the U.S. capital, Philadelphia, to defeat Washington's army in the field, and then to gain control over and hold onto large areas of American territory. The first goal proved to be irrelevant for the most part. Second goal, Washington prevented by keeping his army intact. And the third goal was uh, won by South Carolina, as we see in this book. They really were integral to the overall success of the war for the Americans by preventing the British to hold on to the South by and large. The subtitle of his book is A Battlefield History, which is appropriate as this book goes through nearly every battle in South Carolina from the beginning of the war to the end. He also explains in detail how the different types of units were armed and what they were used for, the differences between cavalry and dragoons and legions, etc. He also explains the difference between strategy and tactics, strategy being the overall plan by which a war is fought, and it handles questions of ends and ways and means for a nation to achieve its political goals through war, whereas tactics is the employment of forces in a single battle, which looks at the practices, the methodologies, and the formations of troops at a specific engagement. The video that we watched, A Hornet's Nest by A&E, mainly focuses on three battles in South Carolina, the Waxhaws, Camden, and Cowpens, that also handles things such as Clinton's test oath, the stalemate of the war in the North, the growing importance of the French Navy, and even political turmoil such as Gates' rivalry with Washington for command. Cowpens is depicted as the linchpin on which the whole war turns, which ultimately leads to Yorktown. And the two main battles that this video focuses on are Camden and Cowpens. We see in both these battles that the failure of the losing side depends a lot on the personal character and mindset of the commander at that time. We see that Gates's arrogance and overconfidence leads him to make a huge tactical blunder at Camden, and we see that Tarleton's impetuosity leads to his defeat at Cowpens. We also see that both battles rise and fall on the use of the militia. Um, we see that at Camden's, Gates misplaces the militia. He puts the weak, untested militia units on his left, immediately facing the British right, which is where the British had their strongest and most well-seasoned regiments. And the militia had not experienced a British bayonet charge before this point, and they broke and ran at the first charge. And Gates himself ends up having to flee all the way to Hillsborough, North Carolina. The army is shattered because of this blunder. And we see, on the other hand, the militia's importance at Cowpens, where Morgan, knowing the experience at Camden, he anticipates the militia's weakness, their tendency to run in the face of bayonet charges. And so he used this knowledge to make use of the militia effectively. He has them fire 2 or 3 volleys and then make an orderly retreat behind the Continentals to shield them from the British bayonet charge. So we see just the skill of Morgan at Cowpens, that he knew his enemy, he knew what Tarleton would do, that he had a propensity for quick strikes, that he was a little overconfident due to the recent victory at Camden. He knew his men, he knew the strengths of the Continentals and the weaknesses of the militia and how to compensate for those weaknesses. And he really comes up, as they say in the video, with a brilliant plan that no one had ever before used the militia effectively against regular troops. And Morgan is the first one to figure out how to do that. So this was overall an interesting study, and these were the major important battles in South Carolina.